Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Kenny, for the invitation. Thank you, Gonzalo, and glad to be here with the colleagues from everywhere. First of all, in the ECN, but I'll come to that in a second. I had foreseen to break a joke on rugby to start this speech, but those who know me would understand why. But maybe it's not the right day to break jokes after what happened yesterday in Brussels, which has also to do with sport and what is happening at the moment in Israel and Gaza. And as Gonzalo said, it's trying times. And it may make you think that what we do in competition policy is secondary order. Well, it is in a way, and in a way it is not, because all these troubles find partly their source in economic disorders, inequality in distribution, and they also have consequences in terms of the working on the economy, and part of our job is to try to make it work to the best of our abilities and make market economies deliver the promise of wealth for people. So it is secondary order, and in a way it is also very fundamental. Just a note for those who didn't follow that the perpetrator was shot dead this morning by the police in Brussels. So the heat of this crisis is finished, but in a world in which professors are stabbed in their schools, I'm sure we will unfortunately see other occasions of such madness. So back to our issue and back to sport a bit, because the analogy can be also happy. I see ourselves as the referees on the pitch, because any good game needs clear rules. And then I would disagree with the gentleman that was suggesting this morning that rules are too simple. My experience, not only in competition, but also for 10 years in financial regulation, is that complex rules benefits large companies, because they have the means to hire hordes of lawyers and economists and lobbyists. And any rules has loopholes. So complex rules usually are a burden for small firms, and they are an opportunity for larger ones. So I like simple. And this is one of the beauty of our competition rules. They are simple. And because they are simple, they're adaptable, and they allow us to capture a variety of situations. And that's good, of course, because, as Gonzalo said, these are trying times in many, many respects. Globalization has been ongoing for decades. And even the crisis of recent years have only slowed down a number of these trends and altered some others. I mean, if you think about how globalization goes these days, maybe because of our more acute awareness of global carbon footprints, we will see some form of deglobalization in the trade of goods, but certainly with the digital revolution, the global reach of enterprises will continue to increase and continue to increase manifold. So my take is that globalization will continue in a different way. Maybe not this kind of all-encompassing, ever more global way, different trends depending on what you're talking about. But certainly will continue to be heavily driven by the digital revolution. And of course, this is not just true for tech companies. Digitalization is pervasive. It invades basically all aspects of our economies, and it is driving increased global penetration for enterprises across all sectors of the economy. So having the task to try to make markets function better and benefit to the people, especially in face of so many long-term challenges and short-term crises, is certainly very exciting, but it's very daring as well. And it requires us to be very joined up as enforcer. And this is why I'm so happy to see so many colleagues from the ECN here, because Europe is the place in the world in which we are the most joined up, applying the same standards of law together. And I think one should be very pleased with the progresses we have achieved over the last 20 years. After 20 years of application of Regulation 1, the way we enforce competition policy in Europe together has changed a great deal, and it will continue to change. And it will continue to change, in my view, in the sense of an even greater integration. And the DMA, which we talked about this morning, is certainly at the forefront of this, because, as was said, it's overlapping. I mean, you do need, for the reasons that were explained, to have a very strong tie to people that are enforcing the symmetric regulatory framework. But you also do need to have this constant feedback loop with antitrust, which is the reason why the coordination was enshrined in the European competition network. And of course, like every complex mechanism, it is fragile. If it is badly operated, it can fail miserably. But if it's well operated, it can be much more efficient than simpler structures. And with the help of our friends in DG Connect, this is what we're trying to do. And also with the help of our friends in the European Competition Network, it's really crucial that we manage to make all this work together with national competition law, with national specific laws, and with the European regulatory framework. So our challenge as referees in this global game is to be joined up. I'm really confident we are and will continue to be even more in Europe, but that, of course, goes beyond Europe. And that means also, this is why it's very welcome that the two events are here in Barcelona this week. We will move from the Spanish Competition Day today to the ICN tomorrow, in which we will be with all our colleagues from everywhere in the world. And there as well, it's now, I think, 25 years that the ICN exists, and the progresses have been considerable, in particular over the last 10 years under the chairmanship of Andreas. So it is a very welcome development. That also means that we need to adapt our rules, our standards. I mean, as I said, the basics are suitably vague so that we can adapt. I mean, Article 101, 102 allow us to travel basically everywhere, but they need to be specified. And this is what we are constantly doing. We are just emerging the biggest ever review of European competition rules everywhere, in all instruments. But what we're specifically busy with now is finalizing the new market definition notice. And this is, of course, important in the line of what I've just said, because things have changed. It was 25 years that this notice had not been updated. I remember that because I was one of the drafters as a young case handler in 1997, believe it or not. And for sure, a number of things have changed since 1997. In the original market definition notice, there is not a word, on tech or digital markets. Nothing on no price markets. Very little on multi-sided markets. So it is clear that it is time to amend this notice. Same way as the way geographic markets evolve. We see it differently now after everything we have testified in the last 20 years. So you can expect the new notice to catch up on all of this based on the practice of the Commission, as well as the practice in the ECN over the last 20 years. And that goes all ways. I mean, for example, geographic market definition is something that is fluid. A number of markets that used to be European are now global. But maybe a number of markets that are now global will become back more restrictive because of carbon footprint. And we should be able to capture these trends in our competition analysis. And it's important for this that we have text that explain to the legal profession, to firms, what is the thinking of the enforcers in Europe when it comes to these important, complex issues. So the challenge is to be dynamic, adaptable, and still predictable. I think it is one of the strengths of our system in Europe that it is relatively predictable. That helps the legal profession to advise firms and tell them, don't even try to do this, which saves us resources, by the way. And that is also good for legal certainty for the business to know that you can rely on predictable and stable competition agencies. The key challenge here is really to try to project this stability at a more global scale than Europe. Because increasingly we see we have to face problems, be it in traditional antitrust or in mergers, that go over and beyond Europe. I mean, take just Illumina Grail, for example. I mean, it's the acquisition of a really small firm, which potential consequences all over the world, and in which it was and it is still extremely important that we cooperate with the United States. And it is more important and more often important than it was 20 years ago. So global cooperation multilaterally within the ICN, but also bilaterally will certainly have a stronger role to play in the near future. That takes me to arguably maybe the most visible effect of globalization on our work, and Gonzalo spoke about this morning, and I mean our stated policy. I think there is no doubt, and we shouldn't hide, that our stated policy is challenged by global and political trends. The succession of crises we have had in 15 years, 3 crises, each of which were told us to be a crisis of the century. Well, that's 3 centuries in 15 years. It is very trying for economies. It is very trying for some of the most deeply embedded certainties we had. And that led basically to a new emphasis on industrial policy. What is interesting is that this industrial policy is not exactly the old industrial policy of the 80s, at least in many respects. In a way, it is an industrial policy that benefited also from the developments in competition policy. In some ways, it remains a bit outdated, if you want my personal opinion, and at the same time, competition policy had to adapt, in particular stated policy. We have realized that for as much as a powerful area in the world economically, we should be comfortable with interdependencies. There are a number of sectors for which over-reliance is a threat. And we've probably been too complacent with this in the past. And probably as well, there is short-term not much other solutions, but to plug the market deficiencies with public money in order to make things happen in Europe that would not happen by the simple forces of the market. If you take the example, for example, of microprocessors, chips, we are over-reliant, and we are over-reliant for a technology that is basically present everywhere in the economy. When you buy a car, when you buy a dishwasher, when you buy a coffee machine, you have a chip in it. So we're not only dependent from these very new and fancy, very small chips, we're very dependent for the average, commodity as well. Can we really afford this? No. And the chip manufacturing will not relocate naturally in Europe. So we need to give it a hand. And this is what we decided collectively with the CHIP Act. This is why we have the IPCIs. And I think this is really where competition policy should play its role to help the economy to thrive in Europe. But of course, one of our key principles, and rightly so, is that we put public money only where it is necessary. So if there is no market deficiency, there is no public money. This is the very big challenge that the IRA posed us. Because the IRA is based on a completely different concept. If you are in the right place in the US, if it is the right activity, if you're making the right investment, you get the money. Whether the public money is necessary or not for your investment to be profitable. Even if it is very profitable, you get the money. We cannot, and probably we do not want, to do this in Europe. We want to focus our resources where it makes things happen that would not happen by the forces of the market. But we cannot ignore this pressure, and this is why the Commission decided in March of this year to allow member states, whenever a company would displace its investment out of Europe onto the US because of IRA, to match whatever aid would have been granted under IRA. Of course, on the basis that the firms would prove that they were certain to obtain and which amount of money in the US. What is interesting is that since the 9th of March, we have had one case in Europe. Not two, not three, one. Because it is different to say, oh, I will shut down in Europe and open in Arizona, from coming with a file saying, I have discussed with the IRS, and this is the amount I will get for this project with these characteristics, and otherwise I can document that I would have done it here in Europe. So in other words, going from pure blackmail to evidence-based economics. When you ask firms to do this, all of a sudden, a lot of the wind disappears, and you're left with a very small handful of cases, which is reassuring, and which is echoed by the latest research that the macroeconomic impact of the IRA on Europe has been minimal so far. And this brings me to maybe the last topic, because I don't want to keep you away from your lunch for too long, which is, of course, it is very good that we subject our member states to this discipline. If you take, for example, IPCIs, which are mushrooming, and it's very good, the control of the Commission on IPCI, which is often criticized as being slow and etc., you have to understand that it is slow, because an IPCI is a bundle of tens of projects, often more than 100, in a complex field, usually, I don't know, hydrogen, microchips, batteries, and that these projects have hundreds of connections with each other. And this is the value of the IPCI. It brings about positive externalities at the European level. But of course, the consequence of this is that you cannot disentangle these projects. They're all linked to a point. And because of this, they all move at the pace of the slowest. So if you have one member state that has done a lousy job, and there is usually more than one, unfortunately, and the projects are badly done, they slow down everybody. And of course, we're understaffed as well, but it's no place to whine, but please keep this in mind, Gonzalo. But IPCIs is a great example, because although it is slow, on average, if you now take it by project. We approve under the IPCI legal base 1.5 projects a week, which I can tell you, given the complexity of this project, is extremely trying. We have been dealing with last year with 5 IPCIs at the same time. And the result of all this, and this is a point I want to make, is that between the amount of money that was notified to us at the beginning of the process and the amount of money that we allowed member states to subsidize at the end, the difference is 9 billion. And you will tell me, yeah, of course, but then if you refuse the money or you reduce the amount of the subsidies, surely some of this project, the firms said, well, we don't do it. No, 0. Because of course firms tend to be generous with themselves when they pitch. So there is to be somebody that checks. Also because these 9 billions, I'm not in charge of the public budget of member states. So that's not my point. My point is simply that the 9 billion we didn't put into this project, we can put in others. So back to my thread, referees are important because they diffuse externalities. They allow the game to be played in a way that is fluid and effective. And the very last word on this is all good for as long as you treat everybody equally. And that is the reason why I think it should be welcomed that we decided to equip ourselves with a foreign subsidy regulation. The foreign subsidy regulation is nothing else, nothing more, than treating subsidies given by foreign firms in the same way as we treat our own member states. So it's not discriminatory. It's not another way to tackle things that we would otherwise should have tackled under the WTO. For example, it doesn't deal with IRA, because IRA is a subsidy given in the US for manufacturing in the US. Then we may import these goods, and that's an issue for trade policy if we want to act. It's not an issue for the foreign subsidy regulation. It is about foreign powers subsidizing firms, as a result, fragmenting our single market and giving these firms in the single market an unfair advantage. This is what we're talking about here. And I think it was really a hole in the toolbox of the regulators, and it's really good that it was plugged. So this is the message I wanted to give you today. You know what they say about rugby, yeah? That's, the British said that. They said that it is a game for ruffians enjoyed by gentlemen. So let's try to keep it that way and not make it football, which is by the same saying is a game for gentlemen enjoyed by ruffians. Thank you.